Hey guys, look at this craziness, huh? So, if you haven't been watching, I live full-time in an RV. I'm camped out, mooch docking is what we call it. There's my RV through the window there. Mooch docking at my parents' house. I'm using their garage as a lab. And what I'm in the process of doing is preparing myself with a new electrical system, not for this RV, but for a new one that I'm receiving sometime in February. I'm switching over to a fifth wheel. And it's a custom build fifth wheel, and so as a result, I'm going to be able to do some really nice stuff with the electrical system much more easily than I could try to retrofit something like this in there. Plus, also because it's custom, the roof is going to be as clear as possible. I mean, we're talking about a vent pipe for the plumbing and maybe a vent for the fan up, and that's it. Nothing else on the roof, no air conditioning, none of that kind of stuff. Because the air conditioning will be a mini split, and I'll have the mini split units inside. So that means I'll get somewhere between 4 and 5 kilowatts of solar on that roof, and that will enable me to do some really serious boondocking. Now, to match up that solar with batteries and inverters, this is what I am currently building. So I'm doing this myself because this isn't something that the RV manufacturer is willing to do. They're not willing to go to this level, and we'll talk about what this is in a second. And I'm building my own batteries because I can do this for about 1/6 the cost. Yes, about 15% of the cost of buying my own batteries. So what you're looking at here is something I built. These are individual cells that I've put together, and all this sort of stuff, which I will get into in later videos about like how to build a battery and all that stuff, and what all these components are. You're looking at 14 kilowatt hours of lithium ion battery. So 14 kilowatt hours of usable power versus what's in there is about maybe 5 kilowatt hours of usable. So that, what is it? 8 batteries at 6 volts. So think of it, about 4 batteries at 220 amp hours, 12 volts. So do the math. Whatever it is, it's a lot less than this, a lot less. And this is only one of 2 batteries that I'm building. So I'm going to have 28 kilowatt hours of battery capacity in the new RV. That means I can run 1,000 watts, which you generally aren't going to do in an RV, for 28 hours straight before I drain the batteries, without solar, without anything charging the batteries. So that's pretty impressive. For about less than $4,000, I'm gonna have built those 2 batteries. If I were to have purchased the same amount of batteries, I think it's 22 Battleborn batteries coming in at almost $1,000 a pop, $22,000 versus $4,000. So that's actually 1/8 of the cost, closer to 12% of the cost. So you can see why I chose to do this. This was certainly a big learning process and riskier to do. And I'm still testing these. I've literally just connected these up and started and got these running today, and they are charging those batteries. They arrived probably at something like between 30 to 50% of capacity. So what I'm about to show you isn't it's not calibrated yet. It says it's at 100%, but it doesn't know what it's at yet. But for whatever reason, not for whatever reason, the charger is just awfully sensitive to the DC ripple that comes in from these chargers. So that's not an accurate number at all. But I can see all the different cell voltages and whatnot here, and this is what's making that battery safe, so we can't overcharge or over discharge the batteries. And then all the Victron stuff gives me some really cool stuff like this, so we can see my grid power coming in here, and 5.5 kilowatts coming in, and 4.6 kilowatts going into the battery, or about 86 amps. So let's talk real quick about this. So I've got 2 Victron Quattros They're 48 volts, so that's a 48 volt battery bank. That's another sort of reason that another RV integrator wouldn't want to create this sort of system, is to get this level of power. I've got 10 kilowatts or 10 kVA of power, which is about 8 kilowatts sustained power coming in between these two. And when you're talking about 8 kilowatts of power, you really need a 48 volt system. So there's complications when doing a 48 volt system. What's nice is these wires, you can see that even though I can do 8,000 watts of power, these lines, while they're relatively thick, they're nowhere near as thick. In fact, you really can't even get inverters at this size on 12 volts. They're nowhere near as thick as they would otherwise have to be. So I have 2 inverters, not only so I can have 8 kilowatts, so it's 4 each, but they are operating in sequence or in pair with each other to create split phase 240 volt power. And normally that's not necessary on an RV, but in mine it is, because the mini split air conditioning is actually 240 volts. So I'll be able to feed 120 and 240 from this system. And the way I've got it wired up, I mean, this is really just a demo installation, a sort of proof of concept here, make sure I understand this and get it to work and the batteries are okay, et cetera, et cetera. This is not how it's going to actually look in the RV, but it'll be somewhat similar. They'll be mounted. This just be better wiring. But this plug right here is, if you're familiar with RVs or a stove plug, that's a 50 amp, 240 volt outlet. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to plug that RV into here, and so that'll allow me to power that RV from these batteries and inverters. And what you're seeing me do here is, this is the AC input into the Victron. So this is actually plugged into the house, providing power so that I can charge the batteries using shore power. And at some point, I'm going to plug the RV into here, and I'll prove that it works under these conditions. I will then disconnect this, or I'll throw the breaker and remove shore power, and that should power the RV using these inverting power from that battery. I haven't built the second one yet. I do have all the cells right down here ready to do that. And just kind of put this through the ringer and test it out. And I'm going to keep upping the amperage and making sure everything's good. And I've been walking around. You can certainly use your fingers to feel. Now, of course, this is a 48 volt system, which means you're closer to actual operating voltages above 50 volts. So you've got to be careful with this, even more so than with alternating current electricity. DC shocks are way worse. DC short circuits are way worse. So you got to be super, super careful, know what you're doing. Reach in here with one hand only, the other hand behind your back. And I've been just making sure, feeling all these contact points to make sure they're cold. And I did discover problems when I first got this going. I had some Loctite that I have. These studs are secured in using Loctite. And some Loctite had wicked up and got underneath the bus bars, and were creating resistance between the bus bars and the cell. And so these were starting to heat up, and I was getting all kinds of crazy readings in the BMS, and the BMS actually ended up cutting out. So I had to disassemble and reassemble everything. But anyway, this is a handy tool for measuring actual temperature. So you can see the little red dot here, and I'm reading 68 degrees. If I point it at the wood, it's 63 degrees. So I don't have really any significant temperature rise occurring even when I'm pumping 85 amps into the battery bank. So that's obviously good. So I'll keep cranking that up, and I'll keep making sure that I don't have any more problems. So I check everything. And so there is one hot spot, if you want to even call it that. The chargery system, the BMS system, uses this black box as a sort of relay to connect and disconnect the battery bank if something goes wrong. And this is running warmer than I would think. And I'm also having an issue where even if I shut this off, it appears I'm still getting power to those terminals, and then to the other side of the board to the Victron. So I don't know. I did observe when I was playing with this initially that solid state, that's a solid state relay. It's Chargery's DCC or DC Contactor. It's a solid state relay, and it appears to act like a capacitor in some aspects, and it seems to pass a little bit of voltage or slash current through even when it's off. And I don't know if that has to do with its its capacitor pre-charge circuit, which is really important for inverters, especially of this size. Like if you just connect the DC power to these for the first time, you get a huge arc, especially at these voltages. And so what's been happening is even with the contactor off, when I turn on the battery switch, I get a huge arc in that battery switch, which is not good for that switch. I'm degrading that switch, and every time I do this. And it's also concerning, like, if the contactor shuts off, is it still going to pass power? So I'm just going to do a quick test here shortly, and I'm going to shut off that DCC and make sure that the batteries sort of disappear from this system, and just go from there. So I really don't know what's going on there with that. Those are brand new. It's a brand new item, and maybe they're just not ready for prime time yet, and I might have to go the sort of the old school relay, actual relay, or an actual DC contactor as opposed to a solid state contactor. The disadvantage of that is you also have to include a pre-charge delay circuit, so I would have to get Chargery's pre-charge delay board so that it turns on a separate smaller relay, which goes through a resistor and slowly charges up the capacitive circuits in here, and then turns on the main relay. So we'll play with that. That's one of the things I'm going to play with. I'm going to play with all the stuff I mentioned before. And the one thing I haven't done yet here is I have not hooked up, that's a battery protect on the left, which will feed the 48 volts into the second box, blue box down in the middle here, and that is a 48 volt to 12 volt converter. And this is what's going to power the 12 volt systems in the RV. Now this is only a 30 amp 12 volt output, so that's not enough to power everything in the RV, especially things like the hydraulic systems, like the slides and the jacks. So that's going to actually connect to one of the two SOK batteries. I'm going to create a 12 volt system there, and I'm going to test that out and make sure that sort of theory, if you will, works as well. So, but the big important stuff is working really well so far. So happy with it. Other than the contactor, haven't put any load on this thing yet. I really should have a breaker box over here so I can have 120 and 220 plugs and actual safety breakers and stuff. This is hooked directly into the Victron, so that's not great. But anyway, I think that's a good quick overview of what I've been up to and where things are headed. And if you have any questions, if I didn't provide enough context, sometimes I forget to do that. I apologize. I either assume you've been watching my channel the whole time, or I've been at this for weeks and I forget what I haven't communicated yet. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer them. And if not, you'll see more of this stuff as it progresses. But it's what is it, October? It's almost November 1st actually. It's basically November at this point. And so the new RV won't be ready for another 3 to 4 months. So there's not going to be a heck of a lot going on. I'm probably going to be parked in this driveway for, I'm not sure how long. I haven't figured out the logistics yet. So, I don't know if you noticed, it's snowing outside. Pretty crazy. So I'm dealing with the snow in the RV, and the RV's handling it fine. It's comfortable inside, but shoveling snow outside your RV steps is not exactly my idea of what RVing is all about for me personally, because I don't like ski or make use of winter in that way. I'd rather be somewhere warm. Okay, enough blab. As always, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for being a part of, part of my channel, letting me share my life with you guys, and yeah, this has been a lot of good fun stuff to do, and I appreciate you watching. I enjoy the questions, I enjoy the back and forth, and I enjoy teaching and showing, and so more than happy to continue doing this. So anyway, thumbs up, like, subscribe, etc., 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 all the usual YouTube, blah, blah, blah. Thanks again, guys.